Morning and welcome to Gardening 365. Today is a special day. I wonder why. 1st of August. Saturday is feed day. But for me, the main thing that's made it special is my blueberries are almost ready. And I'm going to be trying one of them very soon. In fact, this one's got its name wrote on it already. First taste this year's blueberries. Oh, absolutely beautiful. And this week's feed is a bit of a hybrid. There's comfrey, nettles and carrot tops in there. So it's a bit of a hybrid feed. Okay, but that's going on the tomatoes and then the potted plants. Also on the chilies and the cucumber and the peppers and the courgettes and anything else I can think of. And I started with a full binful, so that's how much feed I'm going to be using. I haven't shown you in here for a while. This is our chilies. Okay, I can't see any major fruit on them yet. I know some of you got chilies that are fruiting now. Ours are a little bit behind. Then we had a self-set tomato that's got lots of tomatoes on now. Totally different variety to what we've grown, so those will be nice for a change. And the peppers over there as well. They've all just benefited from a good feed. And on my last video I showed you potting up some calabrese and lettuce. They've all seemed to have done really well. So they're all looking good. And there's my 8-door tomatoes, they're looking good too. The automatic window hasn't opened in the greenhouse today so much. So that tells me it's a little bit cool in here today. And looking at the temperature, it's currently 24. So I'd say at the moment we're going to keep the doors shut in here. Okay, so we need it around about 25-30 in here. That would be perfect. So I'm going to shut the doors, try and get a little bit more heat in here. Just been across to a lady's house called Gillian, who kindly gave us these. They're irises, bearded irises, and what we're going to do is put them just up along the side of our pond here, and I think they'll make some lovely scenery for the new pond. Okay, so I'm putting them in at the moment, and I've promised Gillian a photograph of them when they all come out next year. Okay, looking forward to that. Just dug a hole, pushed them in. Soil's really rough here, but I hope they take to that. And then one of the problems is going to be ducks like chomping on things. So if we put enough, there'll be too many in there to chomp them down. So I'm really hoping they will catch. Now some people go out and buy posh kneelers. I've got a piece of carpet. What absolute luxury. When I put these in, by the way, I always put in odd numbers, so 3s or 5s. It looks more natural. Don't ask me why, but evens just doesn't work, so 2s and 4s. So wherever possible, odd numbers, and they look great. And a good drink to soak them in. And I'm using water spread out the duck pond. That should be nice fertilised water. I'm hoping, as I say, they take. Good water in. That's the best way to start anything off. I'm being watched. Oh no! Here comes the heavy brigade. Somebody wants to nibble me plants. And this is Houdini duck, and she's by far the friendliest of all of our ducks. And she loves nothing better to go foraging for worms. And that's what she's doing at the moment. If I do find any, I'll show you me feeding her out of my hands. I knew I'd find one. Houdini. Could there be anything nicer than this sat outside with these. And especially these two. These two are my big buddy ducks. Houdini and brown duck. There are other brown ducks, but there's only this brown duck. She's really friendly, friendlier than any of the others. Just chilling. Oh, no. Crocs and socks. You know your soil ain't great when you can make clay men out of the soil you're digging. We'll call him Morph. That's it, they're all in now. I really do hope they're going to make a spectacular backdrop for our duck pond. The newbies enjoying a new pond. You know what to do. Morning, or should I say afternoon. In fact, it's almost time for me to go in, so it's definitely afternoon. And this is what I spent a proportion of my day making today. It is the top half, a bug house, and I've done it with bamboo and old pieces of wood. And then underneath, it's a bat box. There's 3 sections to it. I'll show you in a minute what I've done. If you look from here, as you go underneath, there's the 3 little inlets for the bats to go underneath. So I'm hoping that will work. Whether the bats eat the bugs, I don't know, but we'll see. What else have I done today? Planted some broad beans, very late broad beans that grow, you plant them now and you can harvest them up to November, December. And I put a couple of lots of cabbage in, again a little bit late for them, and if they are too late to put in the ground this year, I'll just put them in the greenhouse. Okay, but that's pretty much my Sunday. Very shortly, going in for Sunday lunch, lots of veg out the garden. Superb. Forgot to say it was all totally made from recycled wood as well, so very environmentally friendly. And nothing goes to waste, as you know. Morning. We have been out well over an hour, maybe 2, but just started filming now. Claire's just cut one of the edges down, it's far too high, and we've got this brash. And the question always is, what do you do with your rubbish? And for us, it's not rubbish, it's a useful commodity. So what I'm going to do, or what I am doing, is just cutting it up into smaller pieces to make a good layer on my next compost bin. Okay, and then what I will do then, I'll put the rest of that on the top of it, and then I'll create another level of brash. And any of the bigger sticks, I'll keep them, I'll cut them up later on, and then make kindling. Obviously, if you saw my last video, they will need a bit of seasoning, less than an inch. In fact, none of them are bigger than half an inch, so they should be ready pretty much for the winter. But we'll store them till next winter. And that's this year's shallot harvest. And thanks very much for Claire for tying those up. Okay, they'll store really well now after drying. So those are our 4 compost bins, and each one is about 1.5 meters by 1.5 meters, and they've got just over 1 meter in height. So why have we got so much compost? Well, I have to tell you the story really. To tell this story we need to go back to the start, the very start. No, not that start. The start in 2016 when we first moved into Cherry Tree Cottage. And before we moved in, we knew the garden was in a, well, awful state. And we knew there was going to have to be an awful lot of work to get it sorted. But bit by bit, we started to have some wins. And I decided we needed compost bins to fertilise the soil. Now I took inspiration of a compost bin that we had at our previous property, Bateman. And then we ordered wood in, and construction was started. And when construction was finished, we put a final coat of wood preserver onto the bins just to make them weather tight. During this time there was an awful lot of fires taking place, And also what I started to do was to break the soil up with my rotavator. And then what we did was dug the foundations for the very first raised bed. Meantime I was growing vegetables at the top of the garden, put some little footings in, and we started immediately to start raised bed 2. Now instead of using wood, we used a block design, and the idea is blocks wouldn't rot anywhere near as quick as wood, and we might get a raised beds to last for hopefully up to 30 years or something like that. So in the raised beds went the blocks coming up, and then eventually what we started to do is to fill them up. You can see the cladding starting now, and we put wood at the bottom, which is a technique called oogle culture, and then we mixed the soil up with compost and horse manure, and basically started to fill the raised bed up. And in the winter we just covered them over, and then the following year we started growing our very first crops, and we then grew a lot of crops, an awful lot of crops. Okay, with just our 2 raised beds and a bit of really rough garden at the top, and we enjoyed the fruits of cherry tree cottage for the first time. A lot of onions that year as well. Carrots was really good, and we've always had good carrots. And we grew our first potatoes, and even stored carrots and potatoes even in the raised beds. And again in the winter we always just close them up with some compost underneath them for the following year. Now you might have seen I use a walking board. This is really useful to keep the soil really light, and then each year we just use the top piece of the garden just as a normal garden, and I had to rotate it every time and was pulling out the stones. Meanwhile raised bed 3 and 4 was underway, and eventually 5 was started as well. A young man called Ryan helped finish these off for me, and everything was looking good. Filled them up with soil again, started growing crops at the same time as the raised bed construction was going ahead. And we were pleased with what we had. And then following lockdown I had more time, and then I completed raised beds 4 and 5. Okay, and I shaped them with different heights, so now we've got an out and out brassica bed, and we've also got an out and out fruit bed. And we love the raised beds now because we don't have to kneel over to garden. The soil's really light, and you noticed I've rotavated some of the soil up now that you've seen me doing recently, and all the wild grass that's in between now has started to be taken over by cultivated grass. So that's basically the story of my vegetable garden. Well, that concludes this episode of Gardening 365, and here's today's quiz. One of those is worm tea, and one of them is real pea. Now the worm tea is used for feeding the plants. The real pea, I'll show you what that's used for very shortly. Real pea we pour around the edge of our garden, and it's to stop the wild elephants coming into the garden. Does it work? You bet it does. We've had no wild elephants in this garden ever. And the final question is, how long did it take you to watch this video? However long it took, that's roughly how long it would take you to go to Gardening 365 on YouTube and subscribe, and then you can watch all of my videos on there. Okay, and that would be really appreciated. Thank you. Oh, and by the way, I lied. It's 2 foxes, not elephants.